Hi, boys and girls. We're going to continue on with our story of Ramona Quimby, age 8. We are on chapter 4, which is the Quimby's quarrel. A quarrel is a type of fight. It's kind of like a bickering back and forth. But Ramona, said Mrs. Quimby on Saturday, I've already told you I boiled several eggs so that I wouldn't have to boil an egg for you every morning. I put the hard-boiled eggs on one shelf of the refrigerator and the raw eggs on another. In my hurry, I took an egg from the wrong shelf. I'm sorry. What else more can I say? Ramona stayed silent. She felt mean and unhappy because she wanted to forgive her mother, but something in a dark, deep down place inside her would not allow her to. Hearing her teacher call her a show-off and a nuisance hurt so much she could not stop being angry at almost everyone. Mrs. Quimby sighed a little, sort of way, as she gathered up the sheets and towels to feed them into the washing machine in the basement. Ramona stared out the window and wished the misty rain, which fell softly and endlessly, would go away so she could go outdoors and roller skate her bad feelings away. Beezus was no help. She had spent the night at Mary Jane's house with several other girls, and they had stayed up late watching a horror movie on television and eating popcorn. Afterward, they stayed awake talking, too scared to go to sleep. That morning, Beezus had come home tired and grouchy and fell asleep almost immediately. Ramona wandered around the house looking for something to do. When she discovered her father sitting on the couch with a pencil in hand, drawing pad on his knee, and frowning at the one bare foot in front of him. Daddy, what are you doing that for? Ramona asked, wanting to know. That's what I keep asking myself, her father answered, as he wiggled his toes. I have to draw a picture of my foot for art class. I wish I got to do things like that in school, said Ramona. She found a pencil and paper and pulled off a sock and shoe, and she climbed onto the couch beside her father. Both studied their feet and began to sketch. Ramona found that drawing a foot was more difficult than she had expected. Like her father, she stared, frowned, drew, erased, stared, frowned, and drew. For a little while, she forgot she was cross. She was enjoying herself. There, said Ramona at last. She'd drawn a good, not an excellent foot. She looked at her father's paper and was disappointed in what she saw. It was the kind of picture the teacher would pin up in the corner of the room, but no one but the artist would notice it. Her father's foot looked like a flipper. For the first time, Ramona began to doubt that her father was the world's best artist. This thought made her feel sad, in addition to reminding herself that she was cross at the world. Mr. Quimby studied Ramona's picture. That's not bad, he said. Not bad at all. My foot is easier to draw. Ramona felt as if she should apologize for drawing a better foot than her grown-up father. My foot is sort of neater, she explained. Your foot is kind of bony. Your toes are hairy. That makes your foot harder to draw. Mr. Quimby crumpled up his drawing and threw it into the fireplace. You make me sound like Bigfoot, he said with a rueful laugh, as he threw a cushion at Ramona. The day dragged on. By dinner time, Ramona had not been able to forgive her mother, who looked even more tired. Mr. Quimby had crumpled up more unsatisfactory drawings of his foot, and Beezus had emerged from her room sleepy-eyed and half awake when her mother had called them to supper. I wish we could have cornbread again, Ramona said. Not because she particularly liked cornbread, but because she felt so cross she wanted to complain about something. Cornbread was a pretty shade of yellow, which always looked cheerful on a misty day. She leaned forward to sniff her plate of food set before her. Ramona, even though her father did not speak the words, his voice said, We do not sniff food in this house. Ramona sat up. Broccoli and baked potato, both easy to eat. Pot roast. Ramona leaned closer and examined her meat. She could not find one bit of fat, and there was only a little bit of gravy poured over her serving. Good. Ramona refused even the tiniest bit of fat. She did not like the slippery, squishy feeling in her mouth. Delicious, remarked Mr. Quimby, who did not feel like he had to inspect his food before eating. Nice and tender, said Beezus, beginning to cheer up after a rough night. Ramona seized her fork, speared her meat on her plate, and began to saw with her knife. Ramona, try to hold your fork properly, said her father. Don't grip it with your fist. A fork is not a dagger. With a small sigh, Ramona changed the hold of her fork. Grown-ups never remembered how difficult it was cutting meat when one's elbows were so far up below the table. She successfully cut a bite of meat the way her parents thought was proper. It was unusually tender and not the least bit stringy, like some of the pot roasts her mother had prepared. It tasted good, too. Yummy, said Ramona, forgetting her anger. The family ate in contented silence until Beezus pushed aside her gravy. Gravy was fattening, and although Beezus was slender, even skinny, she was not taking any chances. Mother, Beezus' voice accused. This meat has a rough surface. It does, answered Mrs. Quimby innocently. Ramona, understanding her mother was trying to hide something when she saw her parents exchange a secret glance. She, too, scraped her gravy aside. Beezus was right. One edge of the meat was covered with tiny bumps. This meat is tongue! Beezus pushed her serving aside with her fork. I don't like tongue. Tongue? Like Beezus, Ramona pushed her meat aside. Yuck, she said. Girls, stop being silly. Mrs. Quimby's voice was sharp. What do you mean you don't like tongue? Demanded Mr. Quimby. You were just eating it and enjoying it. But I didn't know it was tongue then, said Beezus. I hate tongue. Me too, said Ramona. All those yucky little bumps. Why can't we have plain meat? Mrs. Quimby was losing her patience. Because tongue is cheaper. That's why. It's cheaper and it's nutritious. You know what I think, said Mr. Quimby? I think the whole thing is a lot of nonsense. You liked tongue when you didn't know it was tongue, so there's no reason why you can't eat it now. Yes, the whole thing is ridiculous, said Mrs. Quimby.